Hi there. Nice to see you all, and welcome to the webinar. I want to just start off by saying to you all, this is an opportunity today to share some thoughts, to strategize ways to build and enhance our lives, and to ultimately start to create a new normal that we can all live with and function in a healthy way. I want to just briefly introduce myself. Again, my name is Michael Gaziano. I'm a clinical program manager and therapist here at Sierra Tucson, and I have been doing this kind of work for a while now, and really excited to always share some of my thoughts with all of you. I'm going to read to you just a brief little definition, just so you have a foundation of our discussion today, and then once we get into the slideshow, I'll actually disappear for a while so you can see the slideshow and not necessarily just my handsome face. So the ability to exist consistently in the 21st century is referring to the general opportunity and capacity for Earth's biosphere and human civilization to coexist. That's sustainability today. When we talk about sustainability, it's really about building, enhancing, and continuing to move forward with. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the sustainability and also how to foster a healthy and emotional lifestyle in the challenges that we face. So as we go through the PowerPoint, I will be infusing a lot of thoughts and information to help you as we continue to do this. So I'm going to take myself off and go right to our PowerPoint. Let me see here, give me a second. So I'm having a technical difficulty making my slide move here. Give me one more second, I apologize. There you go. So in this first picture, what I thought was fascinating about it is that there's a lot of activity going on there, and there's a lot of things that are happening, and there's a lot of movement. In my practice that I had many years ago, I called myself interchange, and I used the word inner in a playful way to sort of look at within yourself the changes that are going to be important to do. And the only way that we're going to create a sustainable life for ourselves is to first and foremost find that ability to change the things within ourselves, the things that we have control of. And if you look at this pictures, there's, many different paths that we can take, and sometimes it can feel daunting and overwhelming. When I was driving up to work today, there was traffic today, and I was looking and thinking about in the past year or so, what has sort of changed and what ways have I been able to continue to look at my interchange and also the sustainability of what I'm doing. And it was fascinating when I looked at the fact that, the traffic was there was movement going on, and there was a sense of life. Back in April of last year, which was when I was celebrating Easter, I decided that day, Easter morning, to just go outside and just walk around a little bit. I got up in the morning and I started walking around, and there was no one coming out of their homes. There was no one moving around, and it felt like I was by myself. And of course, this was really at the beginning of the lock-in part of our lives, the lockdown of our lives for a little while. And as I moved around that day, it struck me that one of the changes that I'm going to have to determine to build upon is the capacity to manage things that are out of my control and do it in a way that feels empowering rather than confining. That whole concept that we ran into for a while of isolation and quarantine fostered a very difficult way for us to move forward. So here's the thing that I think was important to realize is that when we created the social isolation that we dealt with, it created issues of depression. There were medical things that started to happen within ourselves. Additional concerns and exacerbations of other risks started to play out for the older population as well. The point I'm trying to make here is that we are always affected by what is around us. There's a book out there, Childhood Disrupted, and one of the premises is how the biology, the way that we are raised, the way that we deal with our lives growing up affects our neurology, the way that we think and the way that we manage our lives. Clearly for all of us, it has been a challenge over this past, several months to a year or so to learn to manage and to deal with things in a way that we never would have anticipated. So, all of this is telling us that with the challenges that we face, that isolation and the way that we're navigating our lives has become quite a different world than what we had before. It looks a lot different, and looks a lot different than even just a week ago. And you know, I coined a term called the COVIDian world, and it really meant that a way that we've all started to create a new norm in our lives. And when it comes to sustainability, we want to create a normal lifestyle that is workable for us. When we're constantly in a state of activation, wondering what's going to happen next, how am I going to be able to deal with this or that? It creates such an exhaustive state that it's hard to even maintain day-to-day life and day-to-day, existence without feeling so overwhelmed. To adapt and to change means to be resilient. And one of the challenges I found to create a level of sustainability is resiliency. And resiliency basically means to be able to bounce back and to be able to sort of grow and thrive. I have found that for many of us, and in the workforce that I'm at here at Sierra Tucson, and with friends that I talk to on the phone or Zoom with, there is tremendous level of resolve and resiliency to say we are going to get through this together. And so one of the things that's important to realize is even with the mandates that we're asked to do, there still can be a sense of togetherness that we're doing it together for the purpose of creating a healthier world and a healthier way to manage our lives growing forward. So I find that even though there's challenges that we have to face daily and changes that happen daily, it doesn't mean we have to react. I find that in life, if I'm proactive versus reactive, it's far more functional for me, and I'm learning that I'm able to breathe a little bit deeper and fuller when I'm feeling like I'm able to manage the day versus the day attempting to manage me. A semblance of normalcy means that we're trying to redefine how to make a day-to-day world work for us. One of my friends lives in Dallas, and I just got an email from him today. And again, I know that many of you may be in that area, and I wish you the best and hope things continue to work out better for the power and things going on. And he shared with me a T-shirt, and one of the things is that it had a funny picture of Texas on it, and it was called I think it was called S Dallas or something. So it was a term sort of playing with Alaska and Dallas together. What was even more funny is they had a logo of a penguin. Now, my buddy knows that I've always liked the concept of penguins. On that logo, the penguin was not wearing a mask. And the funny thing was, I thought it would have been normal to see the mask on the penguin rather than not seeing a mask on him, because now it's like our new norm. Our new norm is that as we move around our world, as we move around our days, as we move around our community, we're not seeing faces so much anymore. So one of the new normalcies that we're learning to adapt to is being able to read people through their eyes, through hearing their voice, and sort of tuning in ways that we've never been able to do before. And I find that this is creating a new, exciting way to start to re-engage with people, and to start to establish a way of learning to communicate and understand each other in a more fuller way because of that face being removed, so to speak, at times. Sometimes it may be difficult to read somebody. I always tell somebody that is asking me about my mask is I say there's always a smile behind my mask because I don't want to hide the joy of my life and the intent for me to feel fulfilled as I move forward. I find it funny that if you look at a washer and some of the newer washers may not have this particular setting on it. Yet in the past, that's what normal meant. It was a setting on it was a setting on a washing machine. It was a setting on an appliance. We never really thought about normal being defined in ways that wasn't normal, because we all thought, well, that's just normal. That's just the way it is. I think what's important to realize is we can recreate normalcy in our lives based on the patterns of what we choose to do on a daily basis that we establish. And I'll go into that as we talk further. However, I just want you to realize that normal is a relevant term. It's a setting on a washing machine. And ultimately, what it's about is creating a sense that creates common understanding and a reduction in chaos. Chaos oftentimes creates crisis. And I don't know if you all know this, but there's two Chinese characters for crisis. One of them is danger. And clearly over the past year or so, and even in our lives, regardless of the pandemic, there's been times where we have been in crisis, whereas there has been danger. The second character is opportunity. And so what I want to stress is even though there's been this crisis we've all been navigating through, there is still tremendous opportunity to enhance, to grow, and to become stronger. Unfortunately, with what we've been dealing with, people have started to find that they resorted back to some maladaptive coping skills to deal and to cope. When the lockdown was in its early stages, believe it or not, I heard a commercial and a promotion through a brewery that was saying if you purchase X amount of our beer, we will provide you with a adoptive dog, that we will get you a dog so that as you're in your home and sheltered down, you can now adopt a dog, and that will, be nice for the dog, so it'll keep them alive and they won't end up in a shelter, and you'll be able to have a companion. What I felt was fascinating around the whole thing is that you needed to purchase a bunch of this beverage in order to adopt the dog. So what we found happening is this. There was certainly an increase and there was a rise based on what happened in our lives. And that increase showed that these maladaptive behaviors were not just around a substance, anxiety, trauma response, and unfortunately, the sense of not wanting to be around and having suicidal thoughts was increasing. So the point is, with all these things going on in our life, many of us started to struggle with maladaptive ways to manage because just didn't know what to do. And again, from an interchange point of view, left to yourself and your own way of managing your life, it started to shine a light on maybe the ways that you tried to navigate and work through issues. And for some of you, it may have been where you're like, you know what, I didn't realize that I turned back to behaviors that I thought I was able to manage. So sustainability is important because what we're saying is doing things over and over again, creating repetition, and making sure that you're committed to this self-care is the way that this is going to work. Now, there is a sense that people have felt more guarded and unsafe since the pandemic has been with us, and it's created again a whole feeling of phobic responses to life, to being out and shopping and interacting and again, of course, safe and social distance way. Yet what happened is it created even more of a level of paranoia and guardedness to the way that we were managing our lives. People continued to have problems with sleep. They were having problems with, so many different things and negative ways of how they were being affected. And I found that if I allow things to sort of drive me rather than me driving them, then I'm being externally driven and I want to be internally driven. I want to find that inner sense of myself to be able to promote a healthier way to cope and to adapt. And clearly in my mind, I call it my itty bitty committee. One of my older friends shared that premise with me about the itty bitty committee, that part of our brain that sort of drives us is we have to create sort of narrative that's positive, productive, and healthy for us. And when we're feeling on guard and we're having struggles with relationships and our difficulty with concentration and sleep, it creates a level of fatigue and exhaustion that makes it difficult to do that. If you realize and think about all of that, then you also realize that we've all been traumatized through what has happened, not only as an essential worker in my role. I've dealt with many different issues and people that have been struggling, and that heightens our level of difficulty managing our own lives. And there's another piece to it, is that pain, both emotional and physical pain, gets exacerbated when we're in a traumatic state and our body and our nervous system is in a dysregulated state. So again, one of the things that we started to notice and has continued to be a challenge is how to regulate our bodies, how to regulate our breathing, how to manage our pain. Managing pain before it manages you is another reference I put in my information that I drew from today. And one of the things to build on is learning that if I'm going to experience flare-ups, whether that flare-up is a physical pain or an emotional pain, it's important to sort of have tools and strategies to address that. And by creating sort of a notebook of ways to manage pain, manage both emotional and physical pain through the tools and the ways that are helpful for you, you can literally learn to manage it so it doesn't manage you. So I like that book. It has some good tools to use in it around ways to reduce flare-ups in our life. One of the key things to reduce any level of flare-up is to allow for an understanding and a compassion within ourselves, that there are days and times where it's going to be difficult for us to get through that day or feel overwhelmed. We don't need to be beating ourselves up during this time in our lives when we're feeling overwhelmed and flooded. What would be more important is to develop a compassion and an understanding and a healthy narrative that basically says, this may be a difficult day, yet we can do this together. We being myself, my mind, my body, working in conjunction to have a healthier way to start that narrative in our mind, and that will oftentimes foster a way to move forward without feeling too overwhelmed. So that all being said, there is good news, and there are many steps that we can take to improve our well-being. I find that, with stress, also anxiety increases, and with the increase in anxiety, again, we get the flare-ups, we get the sense of overwhelmingness, we can feel very hopeless, we can feel like it's hard to see ahead of ourselves. It's funny, I was driving to work today, and there was a Talking Head song, and it was called "The Road to Nowhere." And as I was driving here, I thought, it's ironic that I'm listening to the song. I'm actually not driving on the road to nowhere. I know my destination because it's something I'm familiar with. The good news and practical steps to help to increase well-being is to create familiarity, to create continuity and consistency, and to have compassion when changes happen. So even with all these challenges that are in front of us right now, one of the things that I'm finding that is important to start to do is to create sort of a continuity and a consistency that I can become reliant upon. Just because there are things outside of our control, and granted, the reality and the life experiences we're having around our pandemic, around our lifestyle is real, and I won't dismiss or minimize any of that. It doesn't mean that it's going to have to take away our lives as the way we know it. It can be a way for us to reclaim our lives, to reclaim our normalcy, and do it in practical ways. The American Psychological Association, noted and stated that, once you have, ongoing chronic stress, it does absolutely affect you physically and psychologically. It does increase these other symptoms that are going on. So what it's telling me is that I cannot ignore what's going on within my body. I can't think and just try to avoid. There's a difference between distracting in our lives and avoiding in our lives. Now, for many of us, for a while, we ended up with sort of being in this lockdown period of our lives where you were challenged to determine what would you do with that time. And because I like social media in some ways, in other ways I don't, I was fascinated the way people created opportunity to learn, to grow, to be creative with video, to be creative with humor, to be creative with information sharing. And it was like everyone had a chance, even with all of the stress and all of these things going on, to start to redefine and to explore newness within their lives. So one of the things that's healthy to realize is, given time that you didn't know was available to you, by utilizing and using it in a more productive way, in a more functional way, you can actually take that opportunity to enhance and to build upon, rather than to feel broken down and beaten down. And I'm not saying that it's easy to do this. When we go through life and we feel like we have a plan in place and strategies put into place, and then changes happen, it's like we have to learn brand new ways to sort of navigate. Well, my challenge to all of you is that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We merely need to fortify and enhance the spokes of that wheel. Some of the spokes of that wheel are the stress that we have and learning ways to manage it, the physical challenges that we may have been experiencing, whether we contracted the virus or through other ways have been sort of beaten down and our health has been affected by utilizing and being mindful of, exercise and meditation and mindfulness. They're all ways that we can start to fortify and enhance rather than to feel sort of beaten down, overwhelmed, pressured, struggling with heart issues, struggling with poor nutrition, struggling with our anxiety and our depression. And hear me out. I'm not saying that these strategies are necessarily quick to take shape. Yet I will tell you this: the more that you use something and you build upon it, the more it becomes familiar to you. I think some of you may found that you've developed bad habits or maladaptive things because you continue to do them over and over again, especially during the challenges that we've been facing. So as I looked at this picture, one of the things that struck me was that everyone was wearing a mask. Now, I was watching some sporting events and some other things going on over the past several months, and certain people would be wearing masks, certain people were creating social distancing, and yet I thought, wow, this is real. This is truly the new normal of our life. So it doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad normal or that the normalcy that we're creating is going to, not allow us to flourish and grow. It just means that we're finding a refreshing, new, they use new a lot in marketing, new and improved. And what I'd like to challenge all of you is to shift the word new to refreshing, enhancing, and building upon. Again, those sound like good marketing terms too for some kind of product, yet the product I'm selling is our lives and our mental health. So the new normal is going to be both change and chance. And when I mean chance, it means that you're needing to learn to start to take some risk again in your life, to start to be willing to get out of the sort of familiar way that things have been over the past and to stretch yourself physically and emotionally to take on change and to embrace the chances that change brings. I have found over my life that when I've been asked to make a change, and that change was something that was put in front of me that I wasn't planning on, it was difficult, and I would often feel a reluctance to take that chance to make that change. Yet, when I feel like I have information, when I feel like there is ways to gain insight and clarity to the changes that I'm being asked to make or deciding to make, I'm more apt to take that chance, to take that emotional risk to move forward again. Sustainability is basically about, the capacity for it to continue and to continue to exist and move and grow. If I feel stuck, if I feel stagnated, it's very difficult for me to be able to see any level of sustainability except for that lifestyle. And that lifestyle is going to lead to further struggles with our trauma, our depression, possible substance use, maladaptive behaviors in our relationships. So we're all going to be stressed and stretched to adapt to changes that are coming our way, that have continued to come our way, and taking the chance and the desire for that chance to be a healthy risk to fortify and to move forward. We don't want to end up falling back into old patterns of relapse. And if you take a moment with me to look at what I call relapse, it literally means falling and going backwards in the way that I have been attempting to adapt and to cope. Relapse starts with that itty bitty committee creating negative narrative in our head before we ever act on a behavior that could be maladaptive, such as shopping online or internet concerns or substance use or whatever that may be. So in order to avoid or fall back into relapsing, we want to start to learn healthy ways to cope. And I find that if I use the old analogy of the 8-track tape player. Now that dates me a little bit. However, I don't know if any of you remember, but when we had 8-track tape players, sometimes that 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 tape player, that 8-track would get stuck in the player, and it would play a loop over and over again until what you would do, and what I typically would do, is I would whack the boom box on the side, or in my car, I literally would kick my 8-track deck, and then all of a sudden it would go on to the next song. What's important to realize is that we can start to lovingly, I don't mean realistically, challenge our thinking, not actually whacking ourselves on the side of the head, but yet, in a metaphoric way, challenge our thinking and help to start looking at things from a different point. Because we're in that stuck loop, we're in a very stagnated place. The only way we're going to get unstuck is to create new narrative, new tapes that are more favorable and healthy of how we look at ourselves, and doing it from a productive way. Meditation and to sort of calm yourself is an interesting thing. Now, I've done this for a long time in different ways, and when I was starting to be asked to learn to meditate, I was like, I got way too much stuff going on in my head, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to, quote, reflect or detach from all of what's happening. And a wise person said once to me, well, what is your breathing like? And I looked at him and I said, what the frog dog are you talking about? What do you mean my breathing? I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. And they said, well, have you learned that in meditation, it's about, rhythmic breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, learning to take full breaths, learning to, breathe out the negative energy. And I was like, well, yeah, they told me about it, but I still didn't quite get it because there was so much going on in my head at the time that I wasn't able to attune and listen to them. And then this wise person said to me, have you ever eaten an apple? I said, well, of course I've eaten an apple. He said, have you ever eaten a star fruit? I said, no, what's a star fruit? And he told me about it. And he encouraged me. He said, here's what I want you to do. Go to, one of the local produce places. And this was when I was living in Rockford, Illinois, near Chicago. So there was a wonderful produce place there at the time. He said, I bet they'll have a star fruit for you. He said, get the star fruit and bring it home and just sit with the star fruit. And I said, well, what do you mean sit with it? He said, just look at it. So what I'm telling you is that sometimes meditation isn't about just sort of getting into a nirvana state, a state of serenity. Sometimes it's about slowing and focusing and allowing things to be put into a perspective. When I looked at the star fruit that day, what I noticed is that it had a shape, and I started to sort of embrace that concept of the shape. What we want to do in helping to learn to cope and to adapt is to slow things down, to look at ways that we can sort of become connected to something and to detach from the stress and the things that are overwhelming us. That day, believe it or not, I spent about 45 minutes with that star fruit, just me and the star fruit, looking at it, embracing its texture, touching it, cutting it open to find the fruit, tasting the fruit. All of these things were an experience that allowed me at that moment, not for a lifetime, but just for that moment, to reduce the energy of the things going on in my head and slowing down things so I could put it into a more healthier perspective that didn't feel so big and overwhelming. So again, one of the things to start with and to build on a sustainable, healthy lifestyle that fosters emotional stability is to take time to reflect and to connect. The routines that we're working on are also important because there has been a problem with being sort of thrown off balance. I sometimes think it's interesting that when I got my first shot as an essential worker, I developed vertigo, and the vertigo created a tremendous off-balance sense for me. And again, I was challenged with how do I start to get back balance and to start to establish routine in my life again, especially because for 7 days I was literally away from work because I was off balance. And so during that time, I had actually went to a medical provider, and they said, here's a here's a technique you can do to start to create balance back. And they showed me a way to start using my eyes to shift back and forth and to create, literal balance within my inner ears. And then that balance often resulted in me feeling more able to create a work routine that was functional, productive, and healthy for me. So we want to establish the routines again. We want to replace some of our old routines with some new ones that have, had created that off balancedness, and also to be able to adapt. Work can be a very good way for people to build in a recovery way, especially since it provides daily structure. I had the luxury and the challenge of not being off of work during this last year and a half because I was and am an essential worker. It meant I was going to work to provide service and things that were helping others and ultimately helping me to help my inner peace as well. And you may have found that was a challenge for you and still may be, depending on where you are in your life. And if you ended up working from home and you hadn't done that before, there may have been some challenges there that you needed to work with as well. The point is, we need structure in our life. We need to have purpose in our life, and we need to foster that in a daily way through a level of healthy regimen / desire and want. They talk about in recovery doing 90 meetings in 90 days because you have to sustain your recovery. Yet my challenge to all of you is not that you're feeling that you have to, that after you get into routine, after you get into feeling a sense of connectiveness, you want to. And wanting is a healthier way than feeling having to. Having to fosters a sort of a level of perhaps resistance or resentment because it's feeling like it's required versus what you're wanting to do. So establishing new routines and doing them for 90 days or longer starts to create shifting in our neurobiology, neural pathways, and ultimately we start to change the way that we're doing things. So even with many of the challenges that we faced with our work environment and things that have happened, building daily structure will be, very important to continue to move on and to explore. Getting into the routine, like I said, and working in a way that is scheduled and purposeful creates a level of healthy coping and positive ways to then feel more able to sleep and to rest and to feel restored and rejuvenated. I have found that if I'm able to find routine, wake up and go to bed at similar times, even with the challenges that I face, and get restorative sleep, these are other things that can help me to have interchange and sustainability of healthy emotional health. What's important to realize is restorative sleep means that you're actually getting full sleep where there's cycles within your sleep. If you happen to struggle with sort of sleep concerns or disorders, then you may be realizing that there's also things happening within your body to create further inflammation, more pain, more anxiety, and more struggle. So believe it or not only is establishing routines important, establishing sleep cycles and following sort of an ongoing way to regiment and to regulate your body can absolutely help to create that healthy sustainability. Other productive activities can also help and we can make things more manageable. Now, it was funny. I was, when I said we were early on in the lockdown and I was going to work each day, I would watch these YouTubes or these things on Facebook or other sites, and I would see people learning to play instruments or learning all these new skills, and there was a part of me that goes, "Wow, I want to learn to play the banjo." And then the thought was, "Okay, when am I going to do that?" Well, I can do that when I come home. The funny thing about that was I didn't have a banjo. And so for a while where I could go and find a banjo wasn't available. So what I actually started to learn to do was actually do some collaging and working with some of the sports memorabilia I had to make collages and plaques and frames. And so even though there was a part of me that was sort of longing to learn an instrument and to have the time to do so, what I found is that I created productive activity during the time I was at home to enhance that creative nature that I've always had within myself, to build on that art and that sort of passion for, uh, creating imagery and things that I find joy and love with. And it really made a difference because even though I was going back and forth to work, when I would come home, because it was still a level of self-quarantine with minimal social interaction, the environment I was in felt more friendly and welcoming to me because I was creating more of an environment that felt it was part of me, and it created a sense of feeling fulfilled and connected to. In our lives, if we start to feel apart from rather than a part of, we know that we're not at a place where we're able to feel more in a community or in a social environment. They've done studies on happiness over the years, and there's actually a video on the internet called the Happy Video, and it's not about warm fuzzy and everything's great and we all sing kumbaya. What it's really about is learning what can help sustain happiness. And one of the things that they found, and one of the most important things, was community and social ability and interaction with others. During this time that we've been, struggling, I think that Zoom and other social media mechanisms that at least allows you to see and talk to others has allowed for some level of sanity and stability within our lives, because I know that social contact and community are going to be very important as we continue on this journey together. In the past, obviously, when we were in a healthier way, we had many adaptive coping strategies, and usually it involved confronting problems directly. And when we talk about confronting a problem, it doesn't mean that conflict has to be bad. I will actually tell you that when you learn to deal with conflict, when you learn to confront problems directly, it actually enhances the way that you develop relationships with those people and or the problems that you were facing. Conflict, believe it or not, healthy conflict enhances emotional and social intimacy. When I can learn to work with others, communicate what's going on with a situation, and communicate where I'm at, it was a healthier way to manage my life. If I start to avoid, to shut down, to not want to deal with things, then I realize that I'm falling back into maladaptive behaviors. And ultimately, the piece that I want to challenge all of you is to be compassionate and also realistic of what's going on. Be compassionate to yourself about the fact that there's times and challenges that you'll face that won't always be easy to do. So, work on ways to show yourself care, and also work on perspective and perception of what's really going on with you, and being mindful of how this all can affect your body and the way that you are activated or regulated, depending. Redefining normal is the last part of this discussion as I go on here right now. And again, when we talked about normal earlier on in this webinar, I shared with you that normal literally is something that everyone thought was basically taken for granted. Here's the thing that I want you to hear is that we use the word dysfunction. I use the word dysfunction because of the career I'm in as a therapist. Yet if you can break it down a little bit, dis meaning not, and function, take that function word and just make it fun, not fun. There have been times in our lives, and there's been time in our lives in the most recent past where things haven't been fun. So we all deal with dysfunction to some level or another. So normal is a relevant term that we can determine what we feel is normal for us. Just because we do something and someone says, well, gee, that's weird, it doesn't mean that it's not, normal for us and that it isn't healthy for us. We can literally redefine what that looks like, and we have the control and the right to do so at any time. Now, one of the ways to help to create a healthier adaptive way is to obviously seek out not only the support and the community, but it may be that you're also needing to have, a counseling, to talk to a therapist, whether that's telemed or in person. Because if we start to realize and take a reflective look at our patterns of behavior, Are they helping us get to where we want to go, or are they hindering us and stopping us from the goals and the desires we have in our life? I have found this, that if I'm in a quarantine state, if I'm in a lockdown environment and I'm dealing with others, and there were times when I was dealing with my older daughter, although she had moved out during that time, there were times when we would be together and we could get on each other's nerves, because if you're in that same space for a duration of time, even though we both were essential workers and we were moving back and forth, there'd be times where we were just sort of irritable. And when you didn't have the space and the ability to sort of step away from that, it created a very problematic environment where anger management started to be a challenge. So one of the things to look at from a way of our maladaptive behavior started to surface is perhaps we become more irritable, more overwhelmed, more at edge, and more angry. And usually that anger is underlying resentments and fears and frustration. So ways that we can build on that is learning how to reduce a sense of anger flare-ups by working with the anger instead of the anger working against you, learning to breathe through things, learning to direct it in a more productive way, and perhaps again doing some online classes or webinars or TED Talks or things to learn ways to manage that. Now, cognitive behavioral therapy is another tool, and basically it ties back to that itty bitty committee. If I wake up in the morning and I'm saying it's going to be a bad day, it's going to be a problem here or there, then I can catastrophize or awfulize or sort of create a narrative that's absolutely going to lead the way that my brain thinks. So cognitive therapy helps for you to start to understand some of the thinking errors, some of the ways that are getting in the way of a healthier way to adapt and cope. And ultimately, uh, these are tools that you can work with and build upon. Talked about meditation a little bit more, and as I said, if you find yourself now returning back into your work environment or to other parts of your life that you hadn't had before, and you're starting to get into some of the routines around that, I find that by just sitting sometimes and being able to reflect and to observe, I can start to come to a more relaxed state. There's a technique called 4-3-2-1. And what it basically means is that what you can do in your car sometimes, or even at your house or in a quiet space, is close your eyes for a moment and first of all see if you can hear 4 different things, and then open your eyes and look for 4 different things, and then check in with your body and see if there's 4 different feelings, and then go to 3 and to 2 and to 1. And by the time you get to 0, you're going to find that you're in a more meditative and relaxed state simply by tuning in to senses, to sight, to sound, sometimes to smell, to taste. These are ways that you can meditate. These are ways that you can relax and reduce stress. And then, of course, talking to others, talking to a therapist can be helpful as well. Seeking support can come from many different ways. I shared with you all that from that happiness study. We know that community and support are important ways to enhance and to build a sense of happiness. That can come from your faith. That can come from people that are your mentors. That can come from family and friends. There's no right or wrong way to seek that support, to stay connected. You can do that through, the social media, through phones, through text messaging. There are lots of ways that you can connect and be a part of. And even though there have been challenges that you've had to deal with, using the tools that we have out there and the ways that we can connect are still wonderful opportunities to rebuild, redefine our normal, and to ultimately sort of establish a sense of happiness and connection. Cultivate ways to be calm, and again, realizing that there's going to be times and struggles around that, and that our lives have been affected, and that looking at ways to explore and to reduce that sense of overwhelmingness through familiarity, through continuity, and through consistency are ways that will start to cultivate calm. Believe it or not, there is a fascinating thing called equine therapy, and horses have a way of sensing whether it's safe to be around you or they need to sort of remove themselves because they're a prey animal. They have their eyes on the sides of their head. So one of the things I found that I've learned in having an opportunity here at Zero Tucson was to work with horses in a way I'd never had before. And when I go into an area where horses are at, if I take a deep breath and clear my mind and breathe out that negative energy, ultimately, usually horses want to get closer to me because they feel like I'm more calm. So believe it or not, it's just sort of breathing through some of your thoughts and feelings, breathing in positive energy, breathing out those negative thoughts. It can actually start to create a more sense of calmness for you. That slow, steady breathing, that way of relaxing our muscles, whether it's through yoga, through music, through other things that are out there, it basically helps to start to alter and to reduce our thinking, our mind of distractions become more clear, and we're able to start to create a sense of, again, change and normalcy that we're taking control of and managing on our own rather than life trying to sort of dictate it. We're working with it. I find that when I learn to work and live on life's terms, then it's far better off than where I'm trying to make it on Mike's terms, because in my world, everything is right based on me. And what I've learned is, even though I tell people I have no problem with your difference of opinion as long as it's consistent with mine, I'm basically saying to you that Mike's way is the right way. That's not the reality in life. So learning to be able to, adapt, cope, and to work within where we are, it feels like it's far more manageable. A good day can be a different way of how you want to see it. Making achievable goals is an important part of that. And then starting to look at the risk and the things that you do and how you're able to sort of create a normal routine is going to be another step. Now, this last couple slides are really based on what the CDC has been helping us look at. And, what they're wanting to help you look at is practical ways to deal with situations, to look at perspective, and to learn to take the opportunity to build on the strengths that you already have. As I said, as I started this discussion, I'm not trying today to reinvent a wheel for the ways that we're, adapting and coping in our life. What I'm really attempting to do is enhance the spokes. And if a wheel doesn't have spokes, typically it's going to wobble and get off alignment and out of balance. And it's just not going to work very well to get you on the path you want to go. Where I used to live had a sidewalk, and on that sidewalk, for whatever reason, they literally paved a big wiggly pathway that as you walk down it, you could get a little bit dizzy walking on that sidewalk and looking ahead. And then on the other side of the street, they had a straight sidewalk. And for the life of me, I still don't know why they created that one side with the squiggly sidewalk. The point I'm saying is, sometimes when you're on a path and it starts to feel like it's going to swerve or take you off course, if you had a healthier wheel, if you had spokes that enhance the sort of healthy way to spin forward, to stay in alignment, that path is going to feel a little bit more comfortable for you and a little bit more easier to navigate. Celebrate the things that are working for you. Be grateful for where things are and find satisfaction in completing things. What was it? Mary Poppins said, in every job to be done, there's an element of fun. Find the fun, and soon the job is done. And every task you undertake becomes a piece of cake, and I won't go on. But the point was, you can find fun and joy and success and find gratefulness in your lives, and you can do it in a way that is, silly, playful, or whatever, and be appreciative of where you are. Because if you continue to look at where you're not, then you're missing the opportunity to be where you are, and that's the moment of now and the opportunity to explore that and to build upon it. Again, that last little piece that they bring in, and I fully support, is using your spirituality, finding the ways and the people that would motivate you, inspire you, challenge you from a loving, caring, and compassionate way. So as I complete this part of our webinar, I'm certainly going to open it up to questions. And I just want to say to all of you that, the tools that I've shared and the strategies that I'm trying to build on today are effective as you choose to use them. And the point you want to be able to do is do it in a way that feels fulfilling to you. Let's see here. I'm going to start to look at some questions as we're talking here, and there's a litany of them, and I think that's wonderful, and I appreciate you all sort of, trying to get some clarity about what I'm talking about. Let me peruse through some of these and look at some of the ways people have asked questions. One of the things that was brought up, and I think it's important, and I appreciate what they said, is that another way that maladaptation happens is through our nutrition. And obviously, there have been a lot of challenges around what we put into our body and how that creates nutrition for our mind, our body, and our soul. So we definitely need to be mindful about that. Also, if you don't realize it, sometimes our emotional flare-ups, our pain flare-ups are based on inflammation within our body. And what we put in our body is either going to create inflammation within it or to sort of create an environment that's healthy for us. So there's certainly ways to, take on anti-inflammatory diet to help and to create more copingness with ourselves. Let's see. I'm looking to see here, again, I'm just sort of reading through these questions. Lots of, interesting points and referring back to what I've talked about. A lot of people are asking again about wanting to make sure that they can hear this again and maybe draw from it moving forward. Let's see, it says, sometimes you may feel that there is a point of feeling too far gone and that it's been a point where it's so chronic and it's overwhelming and it's creating a level both within your body to feel a sense of imploding inside of yourself. What I'm hearing and what I want to stress is the fact that I can feel too far gone is at least providing me with a level of insight that I know I'm not where I want to be. Sometimes when I feel like I know where I don't want to be, I start to take some steps to look at what in the past has helped that isn't working right now. And if it's not working right now because of my trauma, because of the way that I've adapted and coped in maladaptive ways, am I willing? And the key word here is to look and to explore other avenues, tools, and ways to get unstuck. It's scary to be at a point where the trauma has taken over your life. And I don't want to minimize or dismiss anyone's trauma and the way that you've dealt with your life. What I want to say is that none of us ever asked to be in traumatic situations or to be a victim of perpetration in any way. What I want to challenge us all to do is to learn to move and grow from that point so that it doesn't become what defines us. It becomes what we learn to work from. And somatic experience work and EMDR and other tools can help with that trauma work. And I would encourage people that are really feeling flooded and overwhelmed to seek out that additional support. What is an effective approach to working with clients whose denial of mental health challenges? Well, one of the things I find that people that are in denial is that there is a fear of being vulnerable, a fear of finding a sense of not being capable or able the way they thought they were. When I look at people that are having a difficulty and in a denial of their mental health, what I'll challenge them to say is, and again, this is just one of the tools I've used in the past, is it sounds to me that you have been able to truly manage your life in a way that you felt was working for you. Are there parts of what has not been working for you that you would like to build upon in a different way? Because clearly you have some good skill sets. Let's look at ways that we can sort of take those skill sets and look at other parts of your life that you're wanting to sort of be challenged and exploring further. So that's just a thought to ponder. Let's see here. The happy video. I think it's called the happy video. I believe it's actually going to be on YouTube. And just look under the phrase happy video. It's about an hour and 20 minutes long. It's a very powerful video because it talks about trauma. It talks about uh, domestic violence. It talks about relationships in ways that are really important to look at, community, and all the different studies and things that have helped to enhance and sort of rebuild happiness in your life. Let's see here. I work in an acute inpatient setting. A lot of our patients are homeless, jobless, etc. Very difficult to help them shift their thinking. Any suggestions? Well, one of the things that I have found, and it seems fascinating to bring out because it's an important thing, is what can they create within themselves or create a sense of connectiveness to? Even though they are truly in a homeless space and struggling with not having a job, it doesn't mean they don't have assets and resources within themselves that they can bring forth. And they can do that in a visual representation by simply going through magazines or drawings and things to look at some of the things that had in the past had brought them joy that they can sort of reflect or look back at that moment of despair. Believe it or not, there is a way to sort of shape a day based on the visual imageries that are presented in front of you. If I come into a home that is with a hoarder or somebody that is feeling, depressed or overwhelmed or anxious, it's going to feel cluttered, it's going to feel in disarray, it's not going to feel welcoming and warming. Someone that comes from a homeless space or a jobless environment is basically saying that I don't have connection and I don't know how to tether onto something that I can become reliant upon. Well, the task that I would challenge anyone is the most reliant piece you can tether to is yourself and what you know to be the truth and the way that you can help yourself to move forward. So another question was, I understand that there have been studies which suggest that veterans that have had spiritual background exhibit greater resilience when managing PTSD compared to those who have not identified faith and spiritual background. So what you're saying, and it's a very true statement, is if I have a sense of faith and I have a sense of connectedness and a sense of comfort to things that are outside of my control that I can turn to, as I may call it, my higher power or God or whatever that fits for them, it actually creates a level of peace. And even with the trauma, the tragedy, and the overwhelmingness, it can still be brought forth through your faith to be able to adapt, manage in a more healthier way. So thank you for pointing that out, and I appreciate that discussion point. Let's see. So I believe we're getting to the end of our webinar time here. And again, the questions you asked were wonderful. I certainly will make sure that the references to the books will be put in and provided to you as well. I just want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to work on enhancing your own lives and allowing me to share some of my past experience. So thank you all. And again, I truly, truly appreciate all of what you bring forth in this process by being with us as we move on this journey of recovery and resiliency and sustainability. Thank you.